The death toll rising in that savage synagogue attack in Jerusalem. 5 people killed, 1 policeman, and 4 worshipers, including 3 Americans. The dead now laid to rest. Leland Vittert is live in Washington as the Israelis vow a harsh response. Of course, Leland, what do you know this morning?
Well, Elizabeth, good morning. The promise of that, quote, harsh response from the Israelis is certainly a noticeable uptick in the rhetoric and a threat they are sure to follow through on. Within hours of the killings, the prime minister ordered security services to demolish the homes of those Palestinian attackers. The killings yesterday morning at a Jerusalem synagogue with meat cleavers is the latest, but perhaps most brutal in a recent wave of attacks and counterattacks in Jerusalem. Among the dead, 3 American citizens who were there at the synagogue for morning prayers. The Israelis, though, face an uphill battle trying to stop these lone wolf-style attacks in Jerusalem, as the perpetrators aren't West Bank Palestinians, but rather from East Jerusalem with residency permits that allow them to travel anywhere in the Jewish state.
I think that the Prime Minister will do what he has to do to restore security in our nation's capital. This is a savage murder at a synagogue in our capital. Imagine that people went in with meat cleavers and guns into a church in Washington, D.C. and started hacking people to death, and then you saw people dancing in the streets. What type of action would America take? So the Prime Minister is going to do what he has to do to protect Israel's citizens.
And that reference by the Israeli ambassador to the United States was about reports that Palestinians were dancing in the streets to celebrate the murders. The Israelis say the Palestinian president should be held responsible, as his unity government includes the militant group Hamas. The Palestinians, for their part, condemn the attack but blame Israel for creating a climate of hostilities that centers around the holy site known to Jews as the Temple Mount, which is also home to Muslims' Al-Aqsa Mosque, that is Islam's 3rd holiest site. Back to you guys in New York.
All right, Leland, thank you very much. In addition to dancing in the street, there are reports that the Palestinians were handing out candies.
Right.
I watched it. Yeah, and one of the Hamas leaders
disturbing.
said that the slaughter was a heroic act, even though there's the dancing in the street, handing out the candy. They were so happy they were able to go in there and kill so many people.
You know, disturbing as you look at the horrific videos that are out when you see the blood-soaked books of worship, ground soaked in red, and then you see people celebrating, handing out snacks, candy, cookies in the streets there. You know, understandably so, why Benjamin Netanyahu is calling for world leaders to just spark outrage, speak outrage. Yeah. But does this from our own president of the United States sound like outrage to you?
Tragically, this is not the first loss of life that we have seen in recent months. Too many Israelis have died, too many Palestinians have died. And at this difficult time, I think it's important for both Palestinians and Israelis to try to work together to lower tensions and to reject violence.
They're going to bulldoze the house of the assailants, and that's what they've done before, and it's been effective. If you're going to go and slaughter people with axes and meat cleavers while they worship in a synagogue, I think that's the least that you could be upset about. The president did go on to say there's no justification for such attacks against innocent civilians. Can we add to the fact that one was a rabbi from Brooklyn and the other is a longtime resident from Kansas City?
But did that sound as though he was fired up about the situation, that he was outraged? I think that's where everybody is begging for a cry here. Sound like this is upsetting, not just another day in the office of terror and a bloodbath and a home of worship, where right now our own NYPD are on high alert at places of worship here in this city and across the states.
Absolutely. And so what does our president do after that act of butchery there at the synagogue? He says both sides need to work on it. Mark Thiessen, who worked for the former president, George W. Bush, says we need condemnation, not moral equivalence. Listen to this.
Islamic radicals took knives and butchered American citizens. It doesn't matter whether it happened in Israel or whether it happened in Iraq. And can you imagine if after the ISIS beheadings, a world leader had come out and said, we need calm on both sides, we need to lower tensions, we need to restrain violence? I mean, this was a terrorist attack. We don't need moral equivalence. We need condemnation from the President of the United States.
Absolutely. All right. Speaking of condemnation, let's switch gears.